Haunted Appalachia Part 2. And today I'm going to be talking about a building I have never seen anybody else discuss before, and a history I've never seen anybody else put together before. So today I'm going to be talking about the Appalachian Wireless Arena, which is also known as the Expo. It sits at the edge of Main Street in front of the entrance to Chloe in Pikeville, Kentucky. Here's a photo of the Expo. It's one of the most known buildings in Pikeville. A lot of workers, like the maintenance workers or the cleaners, will tell you that after hours, when they're there by themselves and they're just cleaning and doing their thing, they commonly will hear like kids giggling and people running and things like that. Now, to my knowledge, I lived in Pikeville for a very long time. To my knowledge, I don't know anything that's ever happened at the Expo that would cause it itself to be haunted. So then I went into the rabbit hole of finding out about the property. And I found out that the property has direct connections to a story that I actually did before. Octavia Hatcher was the woman who was accidentally buried alive in Pikeville in the, I think it was early 1900s. So Octavia Hatcher was married to James Hatcher, who was one of the most wealthy men in Kentucky at that time. He had properties that were all throughout Kentucky, and he was a part of the timber business. However, he also owned the Hatcher Hotel. And the Hatcher Hotel just happened to sit where the Expo does now. So the story goes that soon after Octavia had their first child, shortly after they were married, the child ended up passing away from, I believe, unknown causes, which sent Octavia into this dark, deep depression, and she ended up actually passing away about a month after her son did from a sickness at the time. I don't remember what it's called. She was buried 2 days later. All was well. And then other members of the town started to come down with the same sickness, and they were also passing away. However, there were so many people that were passing away from this that they couldn't get them all buried at a decent time. So some of them were, being stored for days. And then they began to wake up. So as these people were waking up, they're like, oh my goodness, what if Octavia wasn't gone when we buried her? We need to check. So they end up raising her casket from the ground and opening it. And when they do, they found a grisly scene. It is said that her face was contorted as if she was screaming. She also had torn her fingernails off, and very clearly she had been buried alive. James never recovered from this. He ended up forming kind of an obsession with being buried alive. It was his biggest fear, obviously, and that resulted in him designing his own casket. His casket had quick release buttons and bells inside that would go to the outside to let the graveyard workers know if he had died and been buried alive that he was in there. And that's where this ties in. So in the Hatcher Hotel that sits on what is now the property that the Expo sits on, there was a museum that James Hatcher opened, and it was kind of odd for its time. It had things like an iron lung, it had medical equipment like surgical tools, and it had his coffin that was just out for everybody to see. Now, after James lost Octavia and the hotel had this museum put in, he also had a monument built of her and one of baby Jacob. Her monument stands tall on top of her grave, and the reason he had it put there is because if he was at the hotel and he looked up on the hill, he could see her, and it brought him comfort. And then he also said that he felt as if it put her in a position of looking down on him. But Octavia's monument comes with its own stories because it had been broken. Vandals actually had gotten into the area that is now fenced in and broken the arm off of her monument. And that resulted in people saying that they often could hear a woman crying around her grave. And people have actually even seen her. I have a photo from Octavia's grave where you can see a figure in the photo, and I'll put it right here. This is a photo I took years ago at her grave, and if you look right here, there's like a little figure there, and that monument is a lot bigger than you actually think. I don't know if anything bad happened in the Hatcher Hotel. There's not a lot of information about the hotel that I can actually find. However, knowing that they lost a child and that the sounds that are commonly heard within the expo are children laughing and people running and maybe kids running, it makes me wonder if baby Jacob, when he passed away, kind of just stayed around his daddy's business, which was the hotel. James never remarried. He never had any other kids, and he passed away, I believe, in his 80s. So he lived a full life. I think it's entirely possible that because the hotel was a big part of not only James's story, but Octavia's, maybe that's where their spirits remain, and maybe that's what people are hearing when they're going in to clean, and they're hearing kids, and they're hearing people talking and people running and things like that. Maybe it's just the original owners of the people that ran the hotel and unfortunately had a really sad story. Octavia was also a very beautiful woman, and I encourage you, if you've never heard of her story, go look up pictures of her, look up articles of her. I would gladly do her full story again, because I did it a while ago. But that's my personal opinion as to why the expo could possibly be haunted and why people are hearing the kids and the people talking. But nothing malicious has ever happened within the expo that I know of.